All right, what's going on, guys? Today we are going to be doing another one of these scrolling through my IG vids, and we are going to kick it off with the latest drama in the fitness world, the physical assault from Mike Wyck on poor little Jeffery Nippard. So I actually had this queued up to cover in my video anyways before the assault happened because I wanted to talk about this. But let's look at the video that actually started this from Mike.
We all know the science-based guys. Any top three you choose. Tell me if you would describe their physique as excellent, average, or mediocre. And where would you put them in that? I guarantee it's not in excellent. It's somewhere in the middle, right? Science guys.
It's very true. If you look at the evidence-based crew in the natty world, I think the natties with the best physiques are the ones that aren't super obsessed with being evidence-based, like GVS. And I actually really like Mike. I've talked about that before. I met him just like a month or two ago when I was up in Canada at Pure Muscle after the North Americans. Sat down with him, talked to him for a while about this exact topic, and we talked about Nippard and Mike Israel in particular. So, I mean, I'm really with him on the same page with everything he's saying in this video.
This guy is really need to answer this question before anything. Why is it that you remain so mediocre, yet you know so much?
The proof is in the pudding in this industry. You can sit there and think you're the smartest guy in the world, but if you don't got fucking pecs, don't tell me how to get fucking pecs.
Because like, look at him, he applied it and it fucking worked. Bodybuilding, you can be like this big or this short in some cases, maybe this short in other cases.
And literally, he's talking about Nippard and Mike right there, which is hilarious.
It's always short though, no taller than Bassett. Somehow you're an expert on muscle, but you don't have any. And if you do have any, it's not that well put together and there's a lot of
I think he's talking about Mike.
like holes in the physique, and you've prided yourself on being strong. Fucking little, but I'm strong. Fucking stronger than you, dude. It's like, strong doesn't matter. You still are trying to squat 6 plates. I'm not squatting 6 plates. My legs are still bigger than yours. Sadly, you do need to apply what it is that you know for people to trust you. But they got these fucking nerds or these fucking dorks. They try and prove themselves in shows, and they come in like fucking last.
Definitely Dr. Mike reference there. And I agree, you fucking evidence-based nerds, stop geeking out over studies. Those don't mean a freaking thing. Okay, geek out and nerd out over biomechanics. Get the most out of every single repetition. Learn how to put tension where you want. Learn how to actually volumize your physique and get separation. Like, that's not genetic stuff. That comes from how you train, largely. You guys spend so much time worrying about the nuances of shit that doesn't even matter. These studies are garbage, but you don't know how to chest press. You don't know how to hinge properly and keep it an internal rotation bias exercise. And it just makes no sense to me. So I was pretty much on board with all of that. I really like Mike, and I like that he put that out. And then I guess Jeff Nippard had made a little bit of a response video. I'm not going to post that here. It was, just him being, showing his point that he basically defended himself and wasn't mean about it. And I don't know anything about Jeff. I've never watched his content before. I didn't even know who he was until earlier this year when someone wanted me to cover him for one of these. But he seems like a genuinely nice guy, and that seems to be what everyone says about him. So this was a little uncalled for.
So this just happened. Big Mike Van Wyck just assaulted Jeff Nippard in the gym.
Man, Jeff looked like you could see that moment, like right when it clicked that this is actually happening. You could see his like, oh fuck, like that was not cool. Like that looks bad. I mean that is not easy to watch. That looks like fucking child abuse. I mean, here you have Mike Van Wyck freaking looking like a Hell's Angel gang leader, and then you have Jeff Nippard, this nice little fellow who looks like he's in 8th grade and just gets throat checked to the ground. Like, that was a little bit overboard. Like, I don't know what like enraged him so bad that he wanted to physically hurt Jeff. I just can't imagine any scenario where someone could just verbally say something that would drive me to the point to want to assault them or get physical. It's like, I don't know, maybe I've just become more apathetic as I've gotten older, but someone could insult me the worst way possible, and I'm like, I don't fucking care. Who are you? Like, why does your opinion matter to me? Like, I just don't get how people can be like, you dishonored me, or even if you said the most awful shit about someone in my family, like, I'm not gonna fucking fight you unless you physically try to harm me, or you physically try to harm someone in my family, or I don't know, you steal from me or some shit. But it's like words are never going to get me angry. Words might hurt my feelings. They might make me sad. That's my love language. But they're not going to enrage me. Yeah, I can't think of a single, like, just verbal thing that someone could say that would make me want to fight them. I mean, when I was a younger kid, yeah, maybe. But I don't know, like I said, as you get older, I think you just become much more apathetic in life. Like, I don't really have as many highs or as lows, luckily, but everything's kind of even kill. It's hard to get me to move one way or the other. So now, of course, everyone's talking about roid rage and saying that's to blame when it's like, come on. Being on TRT doesn't make you want to go assault little fitness influencers. I mean, even if you were on like Trin, which is the one kind of drug that could like alter your mind state and make some people more aggressive, like I don't think most people would react this way. I think that's just Mike, regardless of if he's taking TRT or not. I think he has a little bit of a temper. Usually you just become a little bit more of whatever you are. So I become even more apathetic when I get on Trin. I don't give a fuck about anything except smashing some morbidly obese baddies, which if you saw my scrolling IG video where I talked about that when I was in contest prep on Trin, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Other than wanting to assault those fat asses, I'm not wanting to assault or be aggressive with anyone. And most people will agree that have used gear or on gear, that is not the reason for this. That has nothing to do with it, probably. Is Mike just lost his freaking mind. And so Fuad had to make a statement, of course.
Oh, people complain about cancel culture.
And this is on like Reddit because Fuad's talking about cancel culture. He blocked me, so I haven't been able to see his Instagram forever. He's blocked me. Cassim blocked me. There's a lot of people who blocked me.
And how bad it is. And then once something they don't agree with happens, they quickly jump to cancellation. Anybody out there who's messaging me because they think I'm going to kick Mike off the podcast because of whatever happened between him and Jeff, please don't message me anymore. Please don't comment to me anymore about it. Mike will be on the podcast as long as he wants to be. Mike will be my friend.
So I respect Fuad for saying that. I have friends that have done really fucked up things. People are complex. There's layers to us. I've done things that I'm not proud of that I would want my friends to stand by me after. So I'm glad that Fuad's not just jumping on the cancel culture bandwagon, even though this isn't really like cancel culture necessarily. I mean, Mike assaulted the kid, but I mean, he should have to go through like whatever legal ramifications there are, if there are, from that. And then it's not Fuad's duty to punish him.
Forever. And anybody who ditches a friend because something bad happened to them or they're in some type of turmoil.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say something bad happened to him. I would say he caused something bad to happen to him, but he did something. It's not like something just happened to him. It's, oh, happenstance, poor Mike. Like, he was a maniac, and now he's suffering the consequences.
He's a fucking asshole, and that's not who I am. So whatever Mike is dealing with, I'm there to support him and help him deal with it. Whether he's right or wrong doesn't matter to me.
Man, how filtered is the Zoom podcast that Fuad does? Because he looks like totally different here. He looks like someone you would just see walking the streets in Afghanistan. When he's on the podcast, he looks all super whitewashed and nice. I think he must have that filter on or something.
He's still going to be my friend, and he's still going to be on the podcast as my friend whenever he feels like it. So that's just my statement.
So apparently Mike's been banned from the gym where he works, which is, I don't know how he's going to bounce back from that. He trains clients there like all day. That gym is in Burlington, Canada. There's no other gym around that's as good as that, anywhere close. People aren't going to want to like leave that gym. I don't know. Best of luck to him. I hope that eventually he works it out and he gets to come back because he's kind of a fixture there. But you definitely have to like kick him out if you're pure, because then you're totally liable if something else were to ever happen, or you're probably going to deal with a lot of blowback if you don't. People want to cancel their membership, especially because Jeff is so well liked and seems to be such a nice guy. But I'll be interested to see what happens in the next couple of days. Anything else that comes out dealing with this. All right, so next I've got Mr. Joe Bennett, who I've actually had on here before for the same offense, being so confidently incorrect in giving advice on how to get the most out of your pecs. So let's take a look at this.
Here's one simple step to bigger, stronger pecs. Keep your chest up. For the vast majority of people, this will keep more pec fibers in the pressing plane of motion.
All right, so if any of you guys have ever seen my videos, especially if you've seen the last video I made about how to get the most out of your pecs, then you know that I completely disagree with the cue to keep your chest up. We want to keep our intrathoracic and intra-abdominal pressure on while we're doing our presses to get the most out of the pecs, to get the most length and tension out of the pecs as well, but also just to keep tension on it without it going to connective tissue or just compression from the actual rib cage. Also, there's no pressing plane of motion. That's a very dead guy anatomy kind of way of looking at things,
which improves pec mechanics, making you stronger. In addition,
Doesn't improve pec mechanics, but it will make you stronger. Having that extension, you will be able to move more weight, but that's only because you're actually dispersing the tension from your pecs. You're not making your pecs work as hard. So I don't want to dive too deep into the chest press mechanisms here because I talk about it all the time, and I just made a huge video, so check that out if you haven't seen it.
At the bottom of the range of motion, this will improve the pec stretch. And at the top, this can help keep the pecs doing most of the work and not let other muscles take over.
It does not help you get a bigger stretch at all. So I've talked about this before. I don't want to beat a dead horse. Again, if you guys have seen any of my videos, you know I talk about pressing a lot. I never thought my bread and butter and what I've become known for is simply telling people to keep a stack. I thought that was pretty basic shit when I started working out. But that intrathoracic pressure is super vital to keeping tension on your pecs. So he's telling you to extend your back and pull the shoulder blades back. That's not what you want. You want that intrathoracic pressure. I need to see that. You need space between your shoulder blades. You need that area between your shoulder blades, your mediastinum or your dorsal rostrum area, whatever you want to call it. You need that to be pressurized from the inside out to keep tension on the pecs. Real easy to just try this on your own. He's talking about getting more tension at the end range on a fly. You can just hold that and then close your ribs, depress your scapula a little bit, and you'll feel way more tension on the front part, on your pecs, because you have that intrathoracic pressure. You never want to sacrifice the shape of your rib cage. So as we puff up the chest, we're actually compressing our posterior thoracic rib cage, which for some reason Joe doesn't understand.
This chest up position comes from keeping your back extended. While on a flat or inclined bench, try the cue of feeling like you have a string attached to the base of your sternum and it's pulling you to the ceiling. Give this a go today and enjoy some.
So these are terrible cues, and this is probably the thing that the fitness industry gets wrong more than anything else. Nobody understands how to press. So he keeps talking about the stretch. Okay, you're not going to get relative eccentric lengthening. You're not going to get that stretch occurring if you start extended. As I'm lowering, you're not in a position to be able to get a proper 360 expansion when you start in that extended position. You're not going to be able to get your diaphragm to expand and to actually stretch all these muscle fibers that interact with your rib cage, that are attached to your rib cage. So look at the difference between being extended, inhaling, coming down, versus having intrathoracic pressure, intra-abdominal pressure, and then inhaling as I come down. Do you see how I'm able to get way more expansion as I eccentrically load it? And inhale, I'm stretching as I'm loading it. That's relative eccentric lengthening occurring. Again, arch to my back. Try to inhale as I lower. I don't get that same stretch action. I don't feel my pecs. You can literally see the difference. And that's why you should never listen to people who don't actually have pecs telling you how to press. And the guys who actually do have pecs are usually bodybuilders that tell you how to press, and they're telling you how to do it exactly the opposite of all these science-based guys. They tell you to keep your back flat, not to go excessive range of motion. But again, everyone wants to listen to these science-based guys, even though they don't have the credentials in terms of actual physique. So I had to make a comment, and credit to Joe. I've given him some shit before, and he's always a pretty good sport about it. So here I tell him this is the exact opposite of what you should do. You want intrathoracic pressure in order to maximize tension, especially lengthened tension on the pec. Don't compress your ribcage intention to push up your chest. So he says the cue chest up comes from spinal extension, and intrathoracic pressure is something completely independent of spinal position. It's not true at all. So I don't know where he gets that from. So you're perfectly capable of being in this position and maintaining that. Again, intrathoracic pressure means you have an expanded mediastinum, that area between your shoulder blades. Your scapula is depressed and your rhomboids contract isometrically to actually pull your spine back. So if you're extended and retracted, that can't happen. So then he says, I'm not sure what you think compress your ribs means exactly, but spinal extension doesn't do it. All right, here's my rib cage. The way I'm telling you guys to do is to volumize, to open up like that. The more volumized I am, the more stretch action, the more length and tension I'm going to get on the pecs. If I'm trying to extend the spine, what happens? You lose total volume. You have ribs on your back. Your thoracic rib cage is not just to the front. So yes, you can compress your back ribs. It's not like a crazy complex concept. And if you're concerned about the lengthened position, you should definitely maximally extend the spine. Definitely not, as that is necessary for full lengthening to happen. Again, this is somebody who just doesn't understand the complexity of the human body, who's looking at it as a 2D model, as a dead man anatomy model. It's not taking into account how the shape of the axial skeleton influences everything peripherally, or how just a shape change in general can have a huge impact on where force is being distributed. So then I gave him a little bit more of an in-depth response, hoping to help him like want to learn a little bit more on his own, because as I said at the end, you should definitely expand your knowledge base, man. A lot of people look to you. So maybe he will, but probably he'll write me off. You never know. So let's check out one more clip from Joe about pressing.
He's in a position now, because this dumbbell is out here, and this is the line of force here. So this is the line of force, this is the joint. This is a very large distance. Normally I do the moment arms a different color. We'll go over that.
So we're back to dead guy anatomy. Anytime you see someone start to talk about levers and moment arms, and that's really the foundation of their training model, definitely kind of be a little hesitant, because that's someone who's not looking at a comprehensive picture.
That a different color just so it doesn't make my head hurt. So this is that moment arm thing. If you're new here,
Ronnie's actually got a pretty flat back, a pretty good ribcage position on this.
if you're new here, your muscles don't manage load, they manage joint torque. Half of the equation for joint torque is moment arms. If that makes
This is not true. We're not levers and fulcrums. Our joints are helical in nature. They don't move in straight planes.
makes you upset, be angry at physics, don't be angry at me.
It's very much like Doug Brignoli. I don't know if you guys were familiar with him, but a very simplified model that was extrapolated to the real world where it doesn't really work.
Because again, it's literally half the equation of what your muscles do. So having some idea that if I have a dumbbell up here at the top, it's much easier because it's stacked. That moment arm, even though it's 200 pounds, if you're Ronnie and you're coming to the top, there's almost no joint torque here. And this is why when people cheat on dumbbell press, they do this. So somebody will grab the 200 pounds trying to be Ronnie Coleman and just stay in the top. Why is 6 inches at the top harder than 6 inches here at the bottom?
Well, 6 inches from the top can be a lot easier than 6 inches from the bottom, but it can be harder too. Again, he's not looking into anything beyond levers. So if I'm lowering it, say I'm not going quite to 90 degrees and I'm only getting to about there, but if I'm keeping my stack and I'm really getting some decent protraction, that might be more tension, more challenging than someone who is doing a bigger range, but they're just using this compression from the rib cage, taking tension off their muscle, just putting it through their connective tissue and actually through that action of compressing the rib cage. So that versus that, it might be better to use a short range. I'm not saying you should, but you have to, again, look at it beyond pulleys and levers and think about what's happening to the axial skeleton.
Because of that moment arm thing. So what is Ronnie doing amazingly? If you look at his arm and the angle he's traveling through, he's getting a little bit past that most challenging point. So his arm is a little bit past what you would call like kind of that 90, he's somewhere down around here. And he travels up somewhere, around here.
And so if you're just looking at it as pulleys and levers and you think you need to have that moment arm out to here to get the most out of your press, think about what's happening to our axial skeleton, to our rib cage as we do that. As soon as I do that, I can't keep that intrathoracic pressure. If I came down just a little bit, now I'm going to be able to actually keep more tension on my pec. So hypothetically, if it was just dead guy anatomy, maybe it would be better to just try to go as deep as I can from here. But taking into account the rib cage and fluid dynamics of the joint, it's going to be better if I probably bring those elbows down just slightly, because I'm not going to sacrifice the shape. The shape of your axial skeleton needs to take priority of the levers and how you're managing the force distribution through that. You cannot ever sacrifice that intrathoracic or intra-abdominal pressure.
So he's going through maybe almost 90-ish degrees range of motion, where there's the most joint torque and also in a muscle length where you can probably grow really, really well.
Dead guys have levers.
That's Bill Hartman. He is kind of the man when it comes to PT, in my opinion. He's definitely probably the most or one of the most respected guys in the field. And a lot of what I do is based off of his movement model. And what I'm trying to do specifically is kind of bridge the gap between applying this in clinical settings for rehab purposes to applying it in gym settings to increase performance to a degree, but also mainly to improve aesthetics. Because a lot of these things, a lot of these imbalances, they affect your aesthetics really negatively. And you get them from doing things like pressing the way Joe was telling you to, with that hyperextended back, as extended as you can be, as puffed out as you can be. And it happens by kind of working out the way that Joe is suggesting in this big, crazy orientation of extension. That can lead to a lot of shape changes that ultimately aren't very aesthetic. And I'll actually cover this a little bit later when I cover Nick Walker. And so we're going to listen to Bill in just a second talk about this difference between dead guy anatomy and real living anatomy.
So what constitutes a lever? All right, so you got to have a fulcrum. So that's the rule. Otherwise, it's not a lever. Okay? That means that my stick that I'm using as my lever has to touch and put pressure on the fulcrum. That never happens in a living human being with normal, healthy joints.
We have no fulcrums in our body. We're just a floating bag of bones. And within our joints, in between those bones is fluid. And the shape of our exoskeleton influences that largely and how those joints are going to be able to articulate.
They call them levers, like in the tradition.
Because they use dead guys as an example. Have you ever seen a cadaver? Okay. How well do they walk?
Not at all.
Not at all. They roll over? Do they breathe?
No.
Nope. Nope. Are they dry?
So basically, all these questions are to say that a cadaver is not managing the external influences of the world of gravity internally. They're not managing pressure. They're not breathing. They're not compressing and expanding constantly. So the worlds are very different. Things express themselves very differently. So you can't really extrapolate exactly what happens to a cadaver on an anatomy table to what is actually happening in real life, because there's so many more factors at play. So that's just to say, don't let that kind of dead guy anatomy, looking at things as pulling levers, dictate too much of your training, dictate too much of your thought process.
Yes. They are not living human beings, and therefore they have different rules. We can get some relationships in regards to how things might move, but the reality is that they're not human. They're dead, and therefore they have different rules, right? And so they take stuff apart and they look at the dry representations and they go, look, it's a class 2 lever. And then they go, well, that makes total sense, because if you look at the way that it moves through what's the elbow? Is that a class 3? Because it has to do with the moment arm and the position of the fulcrum and then the position of the load, right?
I've never thought about moment arm or fulcrum or levers at all as a trainer, as a physio, with any of my clients, whether it was a hypertrophy client or a rehab client.
Yeah, doesn't work that way.
So it's not that I think like Joe's like a dumb guy at all. I just think you don't know what you don't know, and you should expand your knowledge base, man. I think he gives out some decent information, especially if you're a beginner. But I think the main reason for success is because he comes up with some catchy names. I mean, hypertrophy coach is an awesome name. What does he have here? He's talking about some mobility thing he has. And created Broga. That's a great term. My mobile meathead program. He's great with names, but I think he's very average when it comes to actual knowledge and application. So going from Joe, who doesn't know how to press, let's talk about somebody that does. This dude next to Horse MD, caikepro, I think. So he's just somebody that just popped up on my IG feed through Bodybuilders Without Borders. And I saw that he just had those crazy detailed pecs, that full, not compressed look. And if you've seen some of my videos, you know what I'm talking about when someone has that compressed look. They're never going to be able to look like that if they work out the way that caused them to be compressed. Gets that way from working out with like really shit form and really no regard for the rib cage or pelvic position. When I see somebody like this guy, I know they're going to work out their pecs in a way that is going to be optimal, because you cannot get that kind of fullness if you press the way Joe was just talking about with that crazy extended spine and retracted shoulder blades. So I wanted to see, how does he press? And so this is him, caikepro. I'm not familiar with him because he was physique, and I think he's going to classic now is what I've seen. But I think he'll do good, and he's definitely got a very full, nice, round physique. He'll do good in classic with a little more size. But look at those pecs. Look at that fullness. And look, what do we see here? He's not pushing up his chest. He's not flaring his ribcage. He's not going some crazy range of motion. He's going about 90 degrees. I see a lot of intrathoracic pressure, intra-abdominal pressure. Let's look at this. Same thing. So we have extension, but it's just what is needed. It's just what's necessary. We're not pushing the chest up. We're not trying to hit a crazy range of motion. So because the ribcage is in a good spot, he's getting a lot more tension on his pecs. And just look at that angle. Look at this. How his chest isn't pushed up so much compared to what Joe was trying to coach. So look how much higher that rib cage is. Look at, you can't even see this guy's face. That rib cage is so flared up. Versus this. So there's a reason this guy's got fully developed, striated, detailed pecs. And next up, I've got Nick the Mutant Walker. I've been meaning to cover him for quite a while. I've actually had him in another video, and I ended up editing it out. It ended up just going so long. So he put up some new content, and it just blows my mind that this guy does not get the connection that he should change the way he trains his legs. So let's check out his newest post to see what I'm talking about.
So, I figured I'd get one in at the Dragon's Lair. Today is going to be...
By the way, if you guys haven't ever been to the Dragon's Lair, that gym blows. It is the most overhyped gym I've ever heard of, I've ever been to. And everybody loves Flex, you know, everyone wants to support him, but that gym sucks. First of all, everything is Arsenal equipment, and Arsenal sucks. Arsenal is shit. I wish it wasn't. I had some of it at my gym, and I regret putting it in there. He also has a bunch of Matrix. Like, Matrix is the shittiest brand you can get. That's what I have in my shitty apartment. And so it's kind of like crazy that there's this awesome environment, but there's like 3 good machines in that whole gym. It's garbage. So if you're in Vegas, definitely check out Torture Gym is way better. Elevation is way better. The Las Vegas Athletic Club is way better. Kilo Club. There's a lot better options than the Dragon's Lair. You'll be disappointed if you're going there expecting a lot.
A leg day.
So Nick is using his leg press. He called this his bread and butter quad movement.
The feet are really wide. We're getting really deep. Full knee flexion there. A lot of people say that's not good for the quads. I'm not saying going close is bad. If it works for you, it works for you. But for me, going a little wider, really getting really deep, I can just stimulate the muscle a little harder than normal.
So eloquent with words. No, that's not true, Nick. You're not getting full knee flexion. To get the most out of your quads, you want to get that drive forward. You need to think about internal rotation contact points, the first metatarsal head of your foot and the inner heel. You need to think about keeping pressure there and letting the knees drive forward as far as they can go without losing those contact points. That's how you're going to get the most out of your quads, and yet you should be more narrow. Going out wide, you're going to get some big adductors, you're going to get some glute activation, and guess what? Like, Nick has crazy adductors and a great posterior chain. That's not what you need. You need sweep, and you're not going to get it by pressing from that position. And the hack squat is garbage from Arsenal. It's so short. Like, if you're above 5'6", you're too tall for it. All right, so this is from the YouTube video that clip was pulled from, and we can just get a little bit more view of the actual technique that's going on. All right, so look at how turned out those feet are. I mean, those are like completely turned out. This is an adductor movement. You're not getting a ton of quads. He said he's getting a lot of knee flexion. You're getting some, but you're not getting very much because that knee's not driving forward. You're not getting that positive shin angle. You're not getting the dorsiflexion. You're not getting internal rotation, essentially. And that's why he has to turn his feet out like that, is that's the only way he can kind of create this internal rotation through a compensatory mechanism, because he can't do it having a neutral pelvic position, because he doesn't have the ability to do that because his pelvis isn't neutral.
The feet are really wide. We're getting really deep. A lot of people say that's not good for the quads, but I truly feel it more in the quads without any knee pain.
So if you notice, they cut out the part where he said he gets knee pain on the IG clip. He says he gets knee pain if he goes too close. And that's because he cannot generate internal rotation using relative motion. So the way Nick works out, the fact that he does this whole RP style training, that means he has like a descended pelvis. He has this really dumped forward hip position. When you're here, walk around, you're gonna be flared out on both sides. These femurs externally rotate, and now you're not in a very good position to actually produce internal rotation, especially with keeping tension on your quads. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to perform some sort of compensatory mechanism to create that internal rotation if you're doing like heavy loads. So what he does is he goes real wide with his feet and turns them out, and he actually has a little bit of that knee valgus coming in together, and that's creating the internal rotation. So he definitely is going to have knee pain. I can see where it would come from. And a lot of times, as his femur starts to externally rotate out, the tibia has to almost do double that. It does more than that, because that's going to be the only way for it to be able to actually find those foot contacts on the ground when you're walking and get internal rotation against gravity. So that is not a very great position to be in for your knees, for producing a lot of force. And I don't know the reason why Nick pulled out from the Olympia, but I'm going to speculate it was health reasons. I also don't think his physique's going to be any better than it's ever been. I think he's peaked because he's doing this stupid RP style of training, and it's going to make his stomach even a bigger issue. It's going to make his legs even a bigger issue. But I think he pulled out because his health was bad. From what I can tell, Nick has never taken like downtime. He's pushed the gas since he turned pro. I mean, in the offseason, he's 300 pounds of lean, like at 5'6". I mean, if you go look at my videos a couple months ago when I was getting ready for my show, you see a very big difference in the way things look. So I don't think he's one of the people who actually take the time to recover. So I'm not surprised he wasn't able to get his body to respond properly, because probably was not healthy. And he's starting to get that kind of look where he looks just like Dallas. I mean, they have that same overgrown, like, growth hormone head look going on, and Dallas just kept getting worse. I mean, this was him a month or two before he died. And I just really hope that Nick stays healthy and isn't having health problems that we're unaware of. But he definitely looks like he has pushed the gas a lot, so I just hope he takes it easy a little bit. But anyway, so now if we look at him pressing from this angle, you can really see that gut. And that's what I was talking about. Having a descended pelvis will lead to a belly pooch. And you get that descended pelvis when you just pretty much throw your low back into extension and you give up all your intra-abdominal pressure, all your intrathoracic pressure, because your erectors are so tight and your abs are so tight and your pelvis is descended. It kind of like pushes all your visceral forward, so it all hangs out in front of you, and it makes it super unattractive. Yeah, so he should have his feet narrow, focus on those contact points, and he'd get way more quads. He can't do that because he's in pain, probably. He probably actually needs to, like, pull his pelvis back and try to realign some things. Then he'll be able to produce internal rotation a little easier. Like, that's not what you want. You don't want a huge, crazy range of motion. If you can do a leg press that deep, that means you're so extended and dumped forward. You shouldn't be able to do that deep. The only reason you can do that is because you're so forward, you got extra space to go back. There's always people with fucking big guts that do that. Watch it. And not saying this is a bad exercise. This is great if you want adductors and posterior chain, but you've already got that in spades, big dog. It just does not look very good. And a lot of times, just because you love something and it feels good, doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing. You're kind of playing towards your bias a lot. So, like, I work with a lot of people who were trying to improve their mobility, get rid of pain, by kind of just increasing movement options, essentially movement variability. And so what we want to do is kind of go the opposite of where we're naturally biased. So you may have heard me talk about infrasternal angles before, or on some of my podcasts. So if you're a wide ISA person, you're going to be better at hinges. You're going to be more likely to want to internally rotate. If you're a more narrow ISA, you're more about external rotation. You're more of a, like, squatter versus a hinger. And so in order to restore some relative motion and movement variability, if I'm a wide ISA, I'm going to have you do more things where it's about squatting more upright. If you are a narrow ISA, it's going to be more about getting you to hinge and produce more IR. You don't always want to do what your body is comfortable doing, because that can actually start to compound your imbalances and create maladaptations to where you no longer have other options at all, which I think that's where Nick is. And when we look at this hack, and I gotta hate this hack, hate this gym. The hack is really, really bad form for the quads. So you should be seeing these knees lined up straight. You should see internal rotation of this tibia. You should not see that turned out if you want to keep tension on the quads. And then he's really putting his knees in a pretty bad spot because he's not keeping those contact points. He's not driving real IR. He's doing that through this kind of little collapse here. You'll be able to see it better from another angle. All right, so we have the feet out. They're duck feet there too. And look at that. Like, the way the tibia is kind of externally rotated relative to that femur, that is not good. That is not good at the bottom of the squat. You do not want to see that. So I'm not surprised that he has knee pain at all. So I'm about to cover some squat mechanics kind of in depth in a little bit, but essentially anytime you're descending in a squat pattern, you want to think about the weight being on your heels and then moving to the inner heel to the first metatarsal head, kind of equal on those. And that's going to drive internal rotation down the whole closed chain from the pelvis to the femur to the tibia to the foot. And so the way Nick's walking around, he's not even like in a position to really get good tension on his quads just because his pelvis is so dumped forward and his femur is so excellent rotated. So someone like him, I actually think I can help tremendously improve their aesthetics because he's doing everything wrong for his aesthetics. I feel like I could fix his front lat pose and I could make his quads have so much more flair to the top. He really needs to get off the RP strength train. So I actually had my first interaction with Mr. Paul Carter. If you've seen some of my other scrolling through IG vids, I think he is probably the absolute worst fitness influencer. Him and Squat University are just barely ahead of Dr. Mike. So I made a comment on that Elite FTS post. Someone explaining to me why anyone likes or values anything that comes out of Paul's mouth. I've never seen such shit exercise technique from someone who's supposed to educate. So I'm only such a dick to him because he's just an asshole. And so his response, or you could give an example instead of commenting like a clown. So then I said, honestly, just about every single movement I've seen you perform, but pressing moves in particular. I thought we might have a little bit of a dialogue, kind of go back and forth because I know he will argue or debate with people, but I don't know if he looked at my page and saw there were things that were going over his head, saw me working with Sergio and just said, okay, I'm out of my wheelhouse, but he didn't say anything back. I was hoping we'd have a little bit and have something for you guys, but that was it. That's my only interaction with the worst fitness influencer there is. All right, so last person I'm going to cover is Jeffery Allan Wolf, and I actually just covered him last time as well, but I wasn't really aware of who he was before, and I'm really digging his stuff. We were talking about getting him on the podcast this week. Wasn't able to, but hopefully once he gets back in the country, we will be able to make it happen. So I'm going to try not to go too deep into this stuff because it's kind of in the weeds, but what he's talking about is kind of like creating a lot of controversy and debate in the PT industry, and some of it's kind of silly because it really doesn't make that big of a difference, but it is interesting to think about it, and it's allowed me to kind of look at the squat mechanics a little bit different way. So traditionally, like I was taught that the first part of your squat is external rotation. Like when I was first taught how to squat, it was to create a dome on your foot and to externally rotate as you initiate the squat. That's what I coached, and that is not what I coach at all now, but it's the way a lot of us were taught. So this is kind of the traditional model that we're taught. So the first phase is external rotation, which includes some counter nutation of the pelvis. So it's saying that we're starting here, and then as soon as we initiate that squat, we have a little of that tipping back, a little external rotation. Now, I think sometimes that is true. It depends on what your setup is. If you are super extended in the spine and you're already pretty far forward, then you probably do have a little bit of external rotation, at least some relative counter nutation, maybe not like full counter nutation, but it definitely probably moves backward. However, a lot of people don't have any kind of relative counter nutation at all. In fact, I think it's probably the best if you don't get any counter nutation in your squat at all if you're loaded, but you start in a more relatively counter-nutated spot so that you have space for internal rotation and nutation to occur throughout the rep. So I'll get into this more in a second if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. So this phase 2 is really generally agreed upon. 60 to 100 degrees of hip flexion is your internal rotation kind of bias range. And then phase 3, the thought has always been that you tip back into external rotation and counter nutation. And Jeffery has really been challenging the thought process behind phase 1 and phase 3, where it's talking about turning the squat into an external rotation movement. So using the heel wedge, anterior load, knees toes out, wide stance, inhalation orients the entire pelvis and or lower limb into a more externally rotated position to allow you to move into internal rotation. So he talks about how using a heel wedge or an anterior load will put you in a position to start more in a relatively counter-nutated position so that you have more nutation to move into. So if you're doing like a plate squat on some 20-degree wedges, you're going to start with the pelvis really, really counter-nutated. So you're going to be able to go really straight down and drive that IR, and you're going to have a lot of space to move into. Something that people don't really think about is how you can play with your breathing strategies to get more out of your squats and hinges. So he talks about inhalation as a way to orient the pelvis into a more externally rotated position. So if you have good breathing mechanics, which a lot of people don't, your spine, your lumbar spine actually goes into a little bit of counter nutation with a full inhale. That actually decompresses your spine. That's why like certain chiropractors and people that are real big on yoga for spine health really, really focus on the breathing, on the inhalation, because that's the only way to actually fully decompress your spine if you get it to flex a little bit. Otherwise, it's always a little compressed into that lumbar extension. So if we get a good exhale, get our ribs to drop, and then we inhale, we get a little bit of that relative counter nutation. Now, as I start to squat, I've got a lot more internal rotation space to work with through nutation of the sacrum and internal rotation of the ilium, internal rotation of the femur, internal rotation of the tibia, internal rotation of the foot. I've got a lot more space for that closed chain to work together, to move through. If you don't start from like a relatively counter-nutated position, you won't have as much space and you're likely to have some compensatory IR occur. That could be the foot doing funky stuff falling in, that could be your knees, that could be a shift, or you're more likely to butt wink because you can't find that IR. And so that post was really dealing with the first part of the squat. This one is talking about the bottom part. In general, this is what I would say and what I've been taught, that you achieve the most internal rotation at midpoint of the squat, that you excellently rotate more at the bottom. And it depends on the load. I do think you excellently rotate at the bottom if it's like just a body weight load, or if you've got like a light goblet or a zercher. But as we have to manage more load and produce more force, now our body doesn't really want to go in that counter-nutated position. It's not effective for us to manage that force. It's better to stay in a little bit of a nutated or internally rotated position and not go into that external rotation. So do the shins move forward the most in the middle of a squat or in the bottom? Most of his followers and most of the people in my field, we would say it moves forward the most in the middle. I would say like a little bit more towards the middle, and then really I would say it depends on where the load is. If it's on your back, it's going to be the most at the bottom. So we have some examples. So if we look at this, there's no counter nutation. Look how forward that shin angle is. This guy Asian. He's squatting like an Asian dude. I bet he's Asian. They have the prettiest squats. No backs, but they got legs. But he's got no counter nutation, and he just kind of shifts forward at the end. I don't see any kind of drop into external rotation. The knees are most forward at the bottom. Same thing there. And so this kind of shows you different strategies to get to depth. Some people will shift forward at the bottom more and stay nutated, and some people will counter nutate and kind of round under. I would say if you're gonna go full depth, it's probably better to not have a huge amount of counter nutation, not have a huge amount of butt wink. On my last video, I went really into depth about butt wink, and I don't think it's a terrible thing, but I don't think it's optimal, especially if you're really heavy loaded. So it seems like you're either gonna have an orientation and shift, you're going to have some kind of compensatory IR occur, or you're going to turn into an external rotation butt wink at the bottom. Here we have Mr. Tom Platz squatting. That is a thing of beauty. I mean, if we watch him, you can really see why he had the crazy quads from squatting. His feet are a little bit turned out, but they're so narrow. He's still getting a ton of quad. Look at that drive over the toes. Look how much dorsiflexion and internal rotation that takes to maintain that torso position and that amount of drive forward with the knees. Internal rotation is key to developing quads. Just look at Tom Platz. And I just made a video talking about relative motion where I kind of break down this and how to apply it to any kind of quad movement. Definitely check that out. No butt wink. So this kind of goes against the post that Range of Strength had made, where he said it's not a big deal if you butt wink, and Jeff is saying it's not a good thing if you want to squat well, which I tend to agree with. You don't always need counter nutation. I think if you are body weight and you're like not managing a load, I think the normal mechanics should be counter nutation. And so in here he talks about many don't counter nutate at the bottom. It's about being more counter nutate at the top, which we talked about. So you can have more nutation as you descend. This dynamic shift helps load the glute effectively and support internal rotation throughout the movement. Again, you need internal rotation throughout the whole movement to maximize tension on your quads and to maximize tension on your glutes, actually. Full depth squat struggles aren't just about the center of mass back. I would agree with that. I think you should start with your center of mass back. I always like to initiate with some like early propulsive mechanics, dropping through the heels, trying to stay relatively upright with the knees going forward. But as soon as you start the descent, now it's about being able to maintain internal rotation to get deeper. And he says the reason people struggle to reach full depth isn't that their center of mass shifts forward too much. They have an inability to continue to move forward the center of mass. So again, he talks about why starting from a more counter-nutated position can help with this. Spinal flexion moves the center of mass backwards and causes a loss of hip flexion in the closed chain. So again, this is why you don't want to force your depth so far that you have a big butt wink. You're going to lose a lot of tension on all your legs, but especially your quads. High-level weightlifters have more internal rotation at the bottom of their squats. Yeah, that's true, and I think it's true because if they didn't, they would be injured all the time. You can't get into that position without a high level of internal rotation. And a lot of times, especially when they're doing max efforts, they're doing compensatory movements, but they're not having compensatory adaptations to this. They're able to just go there when they need to for that moment, for that heavy load. And that's because they have so much IR that they're able to get away with a little bit of orientation. Better cues emerge from better models. And so, I mean, that's why he's doing this. A lot of people were giving weird cues way back in the day, like knees out, then knees in, kind of like fill your arch and collapse your arch. I don't think any of that's necessary. I think you can keep your squat pretty simple. So here's an example. And now, I wouldn't say this is good IR. There's a reason this guy is all bandaged up. I would not ever squat this deep for really any reason with this load. But he can do and he can manage it better that way than to be able to tip him backwards for sure. So the way Jeff instructs how to back squat, he says inhale and hold, initiate with the knees forward and the hips slightly back, aim to maintain lumbar lordosis, stand up and repeat. Reset breath and brace at the top. So I really agree with this. And as I talked about, the reason you want to inhale to get a little bit of relative counter-nutation, to have more internal rotation space to move into. Also, that inhale increases your intra-abdominal, intrathoracic pressure as well. So you'll be able to direct tension even more to your quads by not compressing the axial skeleton. I might not worry as much about maintaining lumbar lordosis. I think that should happen if you think about the foot contacts. So I might just add the foot contacts, starting with a little bit more of a heel reference. As you start to descend, you feel more of that first med head, and at the bottom, you're almost to the point where the arch is starting to flatten out, and the knees are just driving forward, hips follow the knees. So knees start the descent, and then the hips go after. So I agree with everything he says. I just would have a little bit about the foot contacts in there, and that might take away the need to even mention the lumbar. All right, so that's all I got for you guys. Be on the lookout. I got a lot of new content coming out. Again, if you guys want to check out the members section, you can have access to Q&As. I respond like right away right now because there's like 5 members, so you get direct access to me. There's some videos on there that are not monetized, just for members, and then you guys also get early access, and you get the library of all the shit I made like years and years ago. A lot of my views have changed on that, but there's still some good info in there for sure. So if you want to support it all, go for it. If not, totally cool. Just keep watching, like, and subscribe. Thanks a lot, guys.